How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Hawkins, and this is the Public Land Sportsman. On this video, I want to break down the hunt where I killed my buck. There's a few things in there that I think should be noted and highlighted. This particular piece of property, I didn't even know was going to be public land until I think late August or maybe early September. I was going fishing and saw the hunting by permit only signs had just been put up. So I immediately went and scouted the area, hung a trail camera in there. And I actually didn't get much for trail cam footage through September and into October. And as you come into this property, it's basically just native grasses, CRP, ragweed, goldenrods, what is that, Russian olive. It all just kind of spills out through there, and it's got some ditch lines that run through there. That there's a few trees growing on these ditch lines, a couple oaks and poplar and paper birch trees, and then some silver maple. So I did not hunt that morning, and actually the morning of November 4th, I was already planning to head back to my number one spot, which was a couple hours away. And I talked to some buddies around here, and they'd been seeing some big deer. I live in farm country, so a lot of these places, if the corn's standing, you don't really know what you have until the rut. And after hunting this place so many times and kind of going there and scouting it during the season and getting a feel for it, I never did see big buck sign in there. I saw a lot of little rubs and a few scrapes, but I never saw anything that just said there's a huge giant buck living in here, big mature buck. So I kind of figured it'd be a good spot for the rut. And so on November 4th, instead of making a 2-hour drive to my number one spot, I decided I'd just spend that afternoon, get up in a tree. I was going to get in there pretty early. I think I headed in there about 12, right about noon. And I think by the time I got in the tree, it was 12:30, 12:45, 12:30 probably. So I was going to spend that afternoon and kind of do an observation sit. You know, during those hunts earlier in the year, I'd noticed that a lot of the deer movement was up by the road. And if you look at the landscape, the way it comes out with the timber, because there's not a lot of timber there, but the way it comes out with the timber, it allows the deer to cross the road and kind of cross these open CRP areas and hit the low spots and use them as travel corridors as the thermals are dropping in the evening and at night. So the tree from my access point, the tree I got in was only 276 yards from the road. And at this point, this was a pretty overlooked spot. And on my walk in there, I've got a pretty stiff wind coming out of the south. I think it was, sustained right around 10 or 11 miles an hour with gusts up to 15, 20. And so I'm making a little bit of noise going in there because it's dry and it's just CRP and grasses. And I had an antlerless deer run up. There was a couple button bucks running around that I wasn't sure if it was one of them or a doe. So I kind of stopped by this little tree. Kind of stopped by this little shrub for a second. And it kind of meandered on off. It was upwind of me, and it just kind of bounced on off and continued to head upwind towards the backside of the property. And I made my way over towards this little ditch line and was going to set up in one of these trees just because of the hunting and scouting I'd done in there. I'd seen where the deer kind of come off this point coming out of this timber back here and go down the edge of this CRP and roll down these ditch lines with the trees growing in them. Then they'll come back up and go through the Russian olives and back through there and make rubs and scrapes. Kind of in this one little general area that was in this corner close to the road, shrubs and that time of day. He must have chased a doe in there that morning. I think that she was what had ran up to me as I was cutting through that tall CRP, and he was laying over there bedded. Well, when I went over and got in that tree, when I got in that paper birch, put my sticks on, get my platform up there, I think it made a lot of noise, or it made enough noise that he caught it in the wind, because he would have been almost downwind of me, just more to the west. Anyways, he heard me climbing that tree, and I think he thought I was another buck raking the leaves. So by the time I get up there and get settled, he's probably sat there and checked the wind, and he's gone through every little thing that a buck goes through for that 45 minutes, and then he deems it safe to come out. He just never catches wind of me, never gets sight of me in the tree the way I'm positioned. The sun would have been behind me, so that would have been perfect. So he comes out looking for a buck, and he just starts hooking trees, raking trees. He's headed the wrong way, and the way he's headed, he's going that way because there's an old farm road that goes over the ditch. So it's really the only access without going through the ditch. So as he's going that way, at this point, I'm feeling pretty confident that he's going to work his way back around and come down that tree line I'm on, because I'm also over another access going to another ditch that kind of heads off to another part of the property. So, like I said, I feel pretty confident about my positioning and what kind of chance I'm going to get at this deer, or what kind of opportunity I'm going to get at this deer. So as he's heading up, he's hooking more bushes and he's making more noise, or he's hooking more bushes, making more rubs. And I'm looking at him at this point. I can tell he's a mature deer. He's got a deep brisket. His belly's hanging. Got a big white face, kind of a Roman type nose. And being November 4th, being a mature deer, I've already decided that if I get the opportunity, I'm going to try to harvest this buck. So here he's moving up and he's still going away. He gets in this one little thicket of Russian olives and he's making a rub and he's really, doing a lot of territorial rut type behavior. So I send a few snort wheezes his way and one of them gets his attention. And I'm not someone that would try a snort wheeze all the time. This being November 4th, the way this buck was already acting, the way I was positioned, I felt like if I tried the snort wheeze and it didn't work, or he didn't pay any attention to it, he was still coming my way anyways, so I didn't think it was much of a risk. And plus, I had just got in a tree, and this is the first deer I saw, so I know what lives in the area where I was hunting, so I felt confident enough that, if this opportunity didn't work out, within a few minutes to however long, another opportunity was going to come its way. And I do a lot of scouting. I start scouting as soon as deer season's over. I scout all the way through spring, summer, into the beginning of next deer season. So I live and breathe whitetail. So I'm out here all the time and I hunt the same way. So for me to take some of these risks, it is a little bit easier, I think, than others, because I have multiple spots where I know where bucks are that I can get in there and try to locate and hunt throughout the season. And I can't tell you how many times I have got in a tree in November. I can think of 3 times off the top of my head, and one of them was the largest whitetail I've ever shot at, and I missed him at 27 yards. But climbing a tree in the afternoon, getting ready for an evening hunt, and a buck hears me going up the tree, whether it's breaking those little tiny twigs or, kind of rubbing the bark going up, and they've come to me multiple times. And when you have little opportunities like that, you got to try to take advantage of them. And, if you got a buck that's going to come to you after hearing something like that, then he's pretty fired up. And that, you kind of know right there, you got a little bit of leeway when it comes to blowing your grunt call or doing a snort wheeze or something to get his attention, to try to get him closer into range. Kind of knowing where these deer were moving through this property, because this property can throw you off. You would immediately want to go to the back side of this property, and that is not the way these deer move through there at that time of year. There was not hardly any pressure. I was the only person going in and out of there. But it's just boots on the ground. It's just constant scouting, constant watching, paying attention to the sign you see, and then paying attention to the land. A lot of setting up on this deer properly was seeing the way the little blocks of wood, little blocks of timber, and little blocks of trees were positioned around this bedding area. It kind of highlighted why they were using the travel corridors they were using. And they would use the timber to keep the cover as long as possible and they would kind of go to the next crossing that got them to cover or timber the quickest. And this little section just happened to have the lowest spot, the lowest elevation around it, running through this little section of bedding. And the difference in elevation is pretty drastic by northern Indiana terms. I mean, I'd have to say it's 20 feet, but where I'm at in northwest Indiana, that's huge. And I find a lot of the deer I chase in these, nobody really hunts these spots because there's not a lot of trees, and the trees that are there aren't the best to get into. You're gonna skylight yourself or be silhouetted on overcast days. You just got to have the right conditions. And I'm not going to say that this was the perfect conditions to go in there. That buck probably had 3 more feet before he would have winded me. And I stopped him. I dropped milkweed, and when I drop milkweed, I drop milkweed for 10 minutes straight. Every time I feel the wind do something different, I'm dropping that milkweed just to kind of get an idea, because I feel like you're learning the whole time. And you're watching that milkweed flow, and, in the cattails, I do it constantly, because even just the little rise in cattails, over, a foot rise and foot change in elevation, if you get a gap in the cattails that's, 20 feet long, it'll cause a little swirl in that little gap the whole time. And that's where those big bucks, they'll sit right there on the edges of those gaps where it swirls. And I dealt with that a lot this year, especially in the early season. I really hunted a lot of overlooked spots, what I thought were overlooked spots. And these were tiny, small places where you didn't have a lot of room for error. And I went in there on some off winds and really blew some spots out starting the year out. But I learned a lot. Learned a lot throughout the year. The off season, and maybe get better position to get on them next year. But I'm super happy with this buck. This will be my first Pope and Young buck, biggest buck I've ever killed with my bow, biggest whitetail buck I've ever killed with my bow. And so I was tickled pink on public land. You know, I think it was 8 minutes from my house, and I think where the deer dropped, it was 173 yards to the road, so it all worked out great. But it was just a lot of scouting, just a lot of paying attention, a lot of, you know, not being scared to take a risk, not being as scared to give them a snort wheeze, and then, you know, having your woodsmanship skills, kind of knowing how deer act and knowing how they work scrape lines and things like that, to feel confident to take those chances. And then trusting in the sign you see. You know, it's so easy for a place like this to just want to shoot straight to the back or shoot straight to the deep part of the property. And I used to do that for years and years and years. I'd run straight to the middle of the property, you know, as far away as I could get, and just be so confident that it was going to happen there because of all the sign I'd seen in other spots. You know, thinking if I'd seen great sign up here running down the side of the highway, then it's got to be great over here. And, you know, it's just through experience and age that I realized, you know, why these deer are going there, because everybody runs to the middle. You know, I'm not saying you can set up on the side of the parking lot everywhere or the side of the road everywhere, but a lot of these places are places I've looked at a million times, and I've thought about hunting. I'm just like, oh, I'm not wasting my time going in there. It's a waste of time. Twice I've done that and killed a buck out of those spots. So pay attention to places like that. You know, trust the sign. You lose a sit. You know, and I know a lot of us don't have a lot of sits, but sometimes it's better to learn than it is to screw the spot up. But at the same time, don't be afraid to go after them. You know, especially hunting public land. That's all I hunt is public land. So I feel like I hunt extremely aggressive because I know there's somebody else just as hungry as me out there. And once they see what I'm after, they'll be after it the same way I am. So, you know, you can contradict yourself over and over with rules when it comes to hunting whitetails, and you just adapt, really. You stay as versatile as you can be. I still like to kind of stay within my strengths. I'm a big raised in southern Alabama, grew up in Mobile. I know swamps, I know river bottoms. Like I do good in areas like that as far as hunting whitetails. So I feel like that kind of increases my odds a little bit, just because it gives me the confidence to make the moves I want to make and terrain like that. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope I didn't bore the crap out of you guys. I appreciate all your love and support, and leave some comments down below. Tell me what you think. Tell me what kind of tips you have, what you see that I'm doing that you would change. I guided in Alaska for years, but you know, I don't mean I'm an expert at anything. I can find something and kill it usually, nine out of 10 times, but that doesn't mean I'm good at what I do. It's just a lot of trial and error. So anyways, thanks a lot, and I will catch you guys on the next one.